Okay, this film and painting have two purposes. I was asked to do a portrait in watercolour by one of the students looking at my YouTube films, who recently saw the portrait construction I've done, showing you how for beginners, showing you how to construct a portrait with halfway, halfway, halfway again. They wanted to see a close-up then in watercolour, that's fine. And just after that I was commissioned to do a double portrait of a lady's parents, and she wanted this portrait to be actually in a landscape, because very kindly she said she likes my landscape paintings, so she wanted to use a photograph of her parents actually in this landscape with the waterfall behind, which is very attractive. The problem I have, of course, is other people's photographs aren't always of the same composition or quality that I would work from normally, and I'll show you the photographs here. You can see this one I don't think is very suitable. The composition, the faces, we don't normally paint people with sunglasses on unless they are blind. It doesn't really flatter them. So we wanted a picture really, if they're wearing normal glasses fine, but we wanted a painting in this case for doing a portrait, not pop art or anything, with just glasses but not with sunglasses or without glasses. So we looked at the various photographs he sent me, such as this one, there's a couple of them together, and this one. And you see in this last one, where we've got the figures with the landscape in the background, the last ones he sent to me because I wasn't very happy with the first ones, we have a much nicer background, but the figures still aren't large enough really. We're going to be painting miniatures within that, even in an A3 painting as she's asked me to do. So I've enlarged by Photoshop, I've enlarged the figures up to give her an idea. She's seen the work I've done on several of the photographs, because I've worked on several to give her an idea of what could be done, and we've decided between us to use this last one. The smile on the mother isn't quite as we'd like, so I'm going to use the smile from one of the other photographs. And I have enhanced several of the other photographs already. For instance, where there's a glare on the glass lenses and so on, not good for a painting. So I've had to Photoshop that out, and I've had to guess, looking at the other eye, how that would be. So in this case we're going to use this last photograph, where you can see now I've enlarged it up here, and we've got a better composition, and it should be quite a nice watercolour. Now we don't want to be reproducing the photograph exactly, we're not doing a representation of a photograph, we're doing both. We're doing a portrait which is still detailed and representational, which is still an illustration, and it's crossed over between that and still being a work of art. So we still want to have the looseness of watercolour, we still want to have the effects of watercolour, the dry brush work, and my style, and the landscape, as a painting, as well as fulfilling the criteria of it being a portrait of her parents. So let's hope that this painting does that, and I'm going to show you the entire film from beginning to end of how this thing is created, working from, in detail, a tight portrait through to much looser figure painting, and then the looser landscape around it. So we're working from the tight portrait through to the looser background at the end. Hope you enjoy it and hope it's useful to you. Again, it's a painting for a purpose. Okay, let's look at the setup we're going to have. Here you can see my studio palette and the paints that I use, and in more detail here, to show you what's actually in that palette, here is a list of the main colours that I do use, although I do have a few extra in that palette you just saw. The paper I'm using is going to be £140 Waterford knot paper. We're doing a fairly detailed picture this time, especially on the figures. We want to work from fairly tight around the faces, because we're getting looser and looser as we expand out from the heads and faces down the bodies and into the background. So I've done a very light drawing first of all, with all the detail and scale and work that I need. I'm going to start with his hat and work my way down into the face gradually. We're working on a vertical at a very slight slope, so I've got to be careful the paint doesn't run down too much. Let's have a look at these colours here. I'm going to start with a very slight tint of green, with a very slightest touch of sap green coming around here, coming up into the hat. Very light watercolour. Then some warmer ultramarine keeping it light at the moment. We're going to drop darker into it as we go along, right across that masking fluid, and you can see it resisting it now, and then linking in over that green at the sides, and then a little touch now of mauve coming in, a little touch of mauve coming in at the edges of that hat, and a little stronger into the green. So now we've got the wet, we can just let that watercolour drop in there, bring that shadow a little bit around the hat, and there's a few little creases coming in. And that's it, leave it alone. Now that blue is going to come down and in and around the face as well, with the shadow under here. And we're going to tint the edge of that hat just a little bit more. Just a good bit more curve. Clean my brush, and I can blend in those edges softly, wet into wet. There we go. That's the hat basically done. So it should be quick and easy and fresh, and I'm going to bring that while it's still wet, because this paper soaks things very quickly. Just a little bit of blue coming down the edge of his hair to give it a slight greyness, and then straight into the base colour for the face that I want, which in this case is going to be a raw sienna, very light raw sienna wash over all the face. Right across the face and down to the neck, you see here. You can still see the drawing underneath, which is going to be quite useful. Now we want to go a lot warmer, and we're going to hit a little bit of cobalt violet, which is warmer, but it's a cool warm. Let that come around the face here. Now, up underneath, I'm going to use some burnt sienna and get up underneath the hat here with that, and start my actual shading. Comes down over his eyebrow quite carefully, down around his hair a little bit here, down around the nose, and a little bit into the eye here. Be careful now that we don't have too much running around the spot. Got to leave the nose light at the end, so we're working our lights first and then our darks gradually into them gently. Down the smile line, gently down that smile line, shadow under the nose here. Working on a very small scale, so I've got to go quite carefully. Down around these smiles, the edge of the face down to the chin, leaving that bit of the chin shining, catching the highlight. Under the neck there, around the chin here, a little bit now, put it to the ear up here. You see, we're well on the way already there, but we need to go darker yet, and warmer yet. So I'm going to take a bit more of my purple now, and the blue, just to get under here in the shadow a bit more, under that hat. And it's gradually drying on me. As it gradually dries, I'm also gradually dropping in these shadows. To make his nose and face stand out more. Under his chin again. little bit by little bit, just carefully dropping it in. And when we get the dark background around it later, that's going to show out, of course, a lot more. Right, we're well on the way there. Get a little more warm to it now. I'm going to take a bit of my rose now and just find his mouth. Don't want to make him too rosy, but we'll find that warmth in the face and around the eye. The nose there. So we're working on a very small scale, so it's not easy. You see the paint is starting to dry now, so I'm getting slightly harder edges, which I don't necessarily want. Gently then building this up. Again going back to our darker colour under here and just dropping in a bit more still to make it a bit darker still. But it's such a small scale. And back to our blue again, in between the lips. A smile line there. Darker line down around the neck. The same over here. Now, we've got to start to blend things a bit more. Just soften that back in where the mouth is there. Bring that out to him. A little bit more shadow going on under the lower lip. Lift out that colour there a bit. Try and get these warms working under the shadowed areas. So we've got our nice light tones there now. Our flesh tones working. A little bit more shadow under that bit now. And then we've got to come in with the final details on that in a moment. Such a small scale to work. Now, that shadow under there. And it's as much lifting out as putting in at times. You see, I've made that brush into a blade there now, so I can use that blade to lift out a fine area along the mouth here. Lift out that very light piece, which I haven't masking fluid, so just to give him a bit of reflection on that lower lip. I'll let that dry off before we paint in the final details on him. We'll come across to the lady, and we'll start with her hair. And I'm going to just wet the hair all the way across, just that area of it. I'm going to just wet the hair all over. I guess we're going to be painting a bit of wet into this. And it's quite a cool yellow at the top, so I need my aureolin yellow. It's a very transparent, cool yellow to start off with. Just up here, it's going to be almost white at the top there, so bring that down. Just through here, quick and simple as that, and again across her face as well. We'll have that colour coming in. It's quite light. And then the cobalt violet I'll use across the lighter areas of the face again. That's given us a basic tone. Now I come out to the other bits of the hair there where it goes quite warm, and I'm going to go into my raw sienna. It's a bit warmer. Down those areas. And the cools then, because actually there are blues coming down, blue greys coming down here. And while it's still wet, I can just flick up the brush like that, look, with this blue-grey, and get the feeling of the hair there. Just a few strokes, leave the lights in between. And we'll put more detail into that a bit later. We want the highlights at the moment, let it dry off a bit. If we go in now, it will spread too much, so we don't want to go in quite yet. Otherwise it's going to spread too much. But we can work on the face a little more. To do that, I'm going to go back to my burnt sienna. The face itself here. Down around those edges. Into her eyes, sockets, just down around the nose, smile lines, her mouth, under her nose. So we're working such a small scale, doesn't give us much room to manoeuvre, but we'll get the job done. Smile line there and down the side of that face. A little bit under the lower lip of warmth, soften it down, and under into a neck there. We want to be into our purple again with the blue, just a touch, because down in here there's more shadow. The eye there. And certainly Now that the paint is drying off a bit on the hair, we can go back into the hair just a little and darken underneath there a bit more. We're going to do more detail when that's a bit drier. And again we want a bit more warmth around her mouth, so a little more of the red coming into those areas as we did before. Touch of rose, not too much, just to warm things up a bit. Down the side of that face, the smile lines round her chin. And again, come back in with a clean brush, clean the brush off, and make the point you want, or a blade, because we can have a point like that or we can make it into a blade like that. I'm going to have a point this time, and just soften in around the smile line here. Bring that up there a bit more. Cheek. Let's get these all nice soft tones before we come in with more detail. Right, now we'll move back across to the gentleman's head. These colours seem very strong at the moment, but in fact the camera's making them stronger than they are, and they're going to dry a bit lighter yet as well. Now very carefully then, or subtly, we want to come in now with our blue greys. So I've got my ultramarine and a little touch of the burnt sienna, and we should be able to very carefully now start to indicate his eyebrow, if the paint isn't too wet. There. Darker under here. Bringing out that shadow from right under there, and the eye itself. I'm not going to be painting in great detail because, as I say, it's a very small portrait indeed. Normally I painted as impressionist, as you know, I wouldn't be painting this sort of detail. But this is a commission, and I am painting a picture directly of these people as carefully as I can in the style that they want. So up under the nostril here, and that smile line just there comes down into here. Be careful we don't make it too hard edged. So I'm working with quite a small picture that I'm actually working from as well to do the details. It's got quite a nice eyebrow there. So we can soften and blend in a bit. And gradually go a little stronger. A bit more blue in there for the eye and make it a bit darker. The beauty of watercolours is we can work very, very finely here. I'd like a little more colour for his top lip. It's not easy because it's such a small area we're working on. And under that lower lip, just to get these features right. It comes down around his face. And a bit darker underneath that hat. Under here. Around his hair and down to his ears. Before we come in there. We're not going to be able to do a lot more with him because it's such a small portrait anyway. Just feel the muscle structure under here again. We're careful, we should just be able to enhance the smile line a fraction and just touch in around a few of these creases. Not a lot, don't exaggerate too much, just a little. As you know, you wouldn't normally see me doing this sort of detail, but in this case that's we're going to do. Now back to the lady again. I say the camera is making her look a lot darker than she actually is, but because she's nowhere near as really as dark as that. I'm going to take my burnt sienna, come straight in here. Burnt sienna, these darker bits of the hair around here. Go onto the corner of the mouth a bit, smile line. Say we can't be painting a miniature portrait here, it's almost what's going on. Now a little of the ultramarine and a tad of the purple in a moment as well. Come back up into the hair. Now we can just indicate a bit of the detail in the hair, even though it's very, very fine down here. You see, we just get the feel of it like that. And we have to find features now. To go to the corner of her mouth here with a little more of the dark. Because we are trying to get a resemblance to her. Carefully, don't want to put too much dark in, just a little more dark into the eye there, a little more dark into the eye here. And then we look at the darks around the edge of the hair. I've stayed fairly light so far, I haven't gone very dark yet. We're going to go a bit darker in a moment when we get round the figure. Just come back with the drawing and just look at that eye there. One's taking out just a little bit maybe. There we go. We don't want to make too much detail. It's just, as detailed as I would ever normally go. Right, while I'm at it, that's dry now. I can take away the masking fluid on his hat here just by rubbing it away with a clean dry finger. So it leaves me that little light area, and that means I can now go back into that with my blue and just get the details a bit more correct around the top of the hat there. And make it look as if there are actual bits of lettering in there. Those lights will show up better later. Right, I don't want to do too much more detail than that at the moment. Just maybe a touch on the mouth. Smile, and we want to start working more and more loosely. Now let's widen out a bit, start looking at the clothing here now, and there's a lovely light blue going on there, and I'm going to actually start, although it's a light blue, it's a very yellowy blue, I'm going to start again here with my aureolin yellow over that, because it's actually a very yellowy blue. And into that I'm going to take some cerulean and just very lightly drop in that cerulean here, down into there, through here, leaving a light edge there and leaving that almost yellow, that top edge. Now take my cobalt blue, we've used ultramarine, now some cobalt blue, and we'll just get the shadow of that blue at the bottom here, round his neck and around that bit there. And then go down to the ultramarine. So even in that small area there's quite a lot of colour. Quite dark ultramarine round there. Around his neck just here. And this will bring the warms out as well. Underneath that there, coming around. Out the side of it here. We form the shirt, as easy as that. Coming back to this lady, she has some of that same blue going on, lightly here under the hair, right down through there, across the shoulder, and here. I'm going to put much darker there in a moment. This is just to get a slight undercoat going so that when I do my other colours they just blend in. And he actually has quite a bit of the cobalt violet going on in the blues coming down here. As well as the aureolin yellow happening at the top edge. So again we'll get the cerulean, but still doing the light areas. Just drop that down through into the, where it's reflecting the light on the top here. Now we've got to go a lot stronger, and here inside there it's quite a deep blue, so I'm taking the ultramarine and I'm going to put a little bit of burnt sienna with that, to make it a touch yellower or greener. It's quite dark. Drop that in there. And take some pure ultramarine and really let that become much bluer with some nice wet into wet watercolour effects here. Coming up around his face, right round that collar, which will make him stand out suddenly. And it's still damp, that, so we can drop some wet into wet to get the effect of the creases here. And start to use the paper a bit as well, and perhaps now you can see why I put those lighter colours in earlier, so that this wouldn't stand out too starkly and they would show. A little bit more cobalt blue there to make it very blue, just that bit there. Do a darker there in a moment. Let's just give a coat of water onto here to get these lights right down through there. There we go. Now we can drop in some more pure colour. Take some of the ultramarine again and start getting these lovely deep blues before we go any warmer. That blue is coming down the side here. And across the bottom. And then we need our much deeper darks. So I'm going to actually take some indigo now. Lovely deep rich indigo, and really lather that in where we've got some of these shadows. You see the lovely effects we can start to get now. Because we've done our tight bit of painting, now we can start to paint a lot looser. I can indicate this creases in his coat and really whack on the paint here, because all of that is dark. And she is also very dark. I've got his trousers to do yet as well. I'm going to go from my round brush to my oval mop for a moment, because I'm painting such large areas, to drop in a large amount of the ultramarine here, first of all, right down his trousers, because there is that ultramarine glowing through in there. For a dry brush, we're just going down with a big brush now, here. And there is some blue down here in the shoes as well. Okay, so as soon as we've got that, we can make that same dark again with the indigo. Get in there, drop it in, tad of burnt sienna perhaps just to warm it a bit, because it is very dark. And the thing with this is that we can go up there again a bit and make that a bit darker still again. There is a little bit of blue just showing down here around that reflection there. Around the knee, but there isn't up there. Straight across there. The thing with this watercolours, we don't want to be too careful, because we're going to lose the spontaneity of it if we're over careful. Equally, we can't just go rushing in blind, so we've got to just gradually work this out to my round brush there. She's got on her hand the cobalt violet here, and a glove. On there, and the same down in here. But into that she has the purple coming. We've got to take the purple and blend that in with the blues, make it darker around there. Before we go in with the deeper purple and some ultramarine. A lovely blue, deep blue purple there, look. Same here. Before we blend that in with the real dark in a moment, just be wet into wet. Right, back to my oval mop again, and the whole of that wants to be done now with the indigo in a moment. The bag. We've got some masking fluid there, you'll see is just resisting it, because we want a light area there later. I'm allowing a bit of dry brush work now because I do want some effects and texture. And there are our figures basically done. We might want to put a bit more dark in as we go along because it's sunk back a bit. So I'm just going to do a bit of dry brush work on there. Such a small scale we're working on, ever so careful. Let's just take that nostril back a fraction. From a distance you won't really notice. There we go. Right, we're ready now to start on the background. Just bring it in over the shoe, and clip it about sienna, and just bring it in over the shoes. Give indication of those there. Just a little on hers too, not much, but let's look at the area around the waterfall. And I want to work with a fairly large brush all the time on that. We're going to be doing quite a bit of wet to wet back up in here. Right, first thing I'm going to do is take some raw sienna and paint a thin wash across here and right through that sky up into those trees, coming down through there, just thinning it right down now to come down through here because I want that to blend in there. I'm going to work on the stonework later, the rock work later. All I want to do is get this colour right at the moment. There we go. Now while that's wet, into that, let's just get a feeling of the dry brush work of the water there. While that's wet, we're going to drop in some slightly stronger colouring. Take a little chrome yellow and find these lovely autumn trees up here. Wet into wet, just dabbling them in there, look. So we're still working on this bit. We've got some nice cool greys happening there and some greens. So next is the trees, a little touch of my sap green, a touch of ultramarine, and we'll just gently find those background trees. Just indicating, let the wet do the work. Coming up through that like that. Soft and hazy as the spray from the waterfalls comes up. Reminds me of a painting I did in Switzerland where they actually filmed the Moriarty fighting Sherlock Holmes, and the watercolour got so damn wet it was almost dissolving. I had to actually leave the site for a while with the painting because there was just far too much humidity in the air. And we get stronger with that blue, so again the ultramarine and a little tiny addition of the burnt sienna because some of these trees are a little bit darker up into here. Just let it gently blend into the paper, and it's going to go around the top of this waterfall here, leaving the waterfall a slightly sharper edge, tickling our trees in. Don't want hard edges, we want soft trees here, right down through to there, up through here, and then there's a little more warm happening, so I'm going to take some light red, which is really a light brown, like Indian red, and let that drop in around here as well. See the effect that has. Look at these autumn colours. Well, this lady very kindly said she liked my landscape, so she particularly wanted her parents painting in a landscape and also a scene that they did actually know as well. So there we have that misty effect there going up above the waterfall. We'll sharpen that a little later. And coming down into here with these blue greys. I'm going to use my hake brush across here in a moment because I want these textures to be done with the hake. And then we'll come back in there with a little stronger colour in a moment. But we've got the basics. We're still using ultramarine now and a little touch of the burnt sienna. Building it up and building it up. Right, leaving that for a moment. Take my hake brush and Now time to look at the tree area around here, because the light areas have to go in first. So I want my autumn leaves, the yellows and the golds, in there now. So I'm going to start with my cool yellow, very transparent aureolin yellow here. It's happening right down round. It's a great brush for doing this sort of work, the hake. Right up through here, the little light areas, comes right up and through. Use the bristles sideways on, you see, to get my feeling of the trees. Right down to there. I've already got it up here, so I'll put just a little more yellow in there now. Right, little touches of that yellow going all the way through in the striations as well, so while we're at it. Now, the stronger yellow, I'm going to take my chrome yellow and start to drop the autumn colours of the chrome yellow in. Because you've got to go stronger than her blonde hair, so that's quite important. And come right through now to even towards cadmium orange. Some lovely autumn colours going on. Even a little bit of that up in here as well. Not too much, just a touch to catch the autumn colours. And they get warmer, so we'll come now down to adding some burnt sienna, some light red burnt sienna to it. And dull that down just a fraction with a touch of blue, because we don't want to get too brighter colours up here. And into that warm light grey we go back to our stronger mixtures of ultramarine and burnt sienna. More ultramarine still. A touch of purple, a little touch of the purple back into here, which will show dark against these trees. I want the people to be a part of the picture, so I'm not going to just rock face going. And the darker blues as they then cascades over. As it gradually gets drier, don't want hard edges, but I can put in some of the stronger colours. I'm gradually building up these outcrops of rock here, just making things around the waterfall a little stronger. And you can see now we're getting a hazy background, but with some definition and the feeling of the rocks and so on there. These darks around him to help do that. And again, I want to start off with a raw sienna, a nice warm, all the way through there, my aureolin yellow, and mix a little of that with some cerulean to give myself a lovely light green, and just drop that in. It does get quite a strong green in places, so again I'm going to take some sap green now and let that go in to really get some quite strong effects of these lovely grasses amongst the warms. Thin it right down, come back into the rock work in the back and see if any of those greens need pulling together into the stonework, which they probably do. To take my brush and try and lift a bit of that out there, because it seems to come very muddy over that bit. I don't want it too bright there, but I would like a bit more of the yellow showing in there. So let's try that again and drop a bit more chrome into there. drag one thing into another a bit to get these things to join in. Now we can start to see how dark things need to be here, if they need to be darkened down any more than they are. And look at the stonework. Again, I want to start off with quite a yellow and drop that in all the way across to get the reflected light. Then I want to come to my cobalt violet, drop that in quite lightly, coming then down to my cerulean blue. We'll start to get the cools of the stonework, and we've got a whole load of lovely rich coloured leaves here in the foreground, which we don't want to lose, sort of dropped from the autumn trees. So they're coming little flecks and so on all the way through here. And the painting should finish just out of the picture here. So we get these bright colours in first, and we know they're done and nice and fresh and clean. Some lovely colours going on down there. So I want to get a little bit of this rose into it now, I think, to really feel those warms, and push that back again. And then we've got our warmer browns in there still. Okay, at this stage we let things dry off because we want to come back in with finer details now after this. Get the indications of these grasses in the background. So we'll leave it at that for the moment. Okay, we want to come back onto the faces and really try and just tidy these up now, get them just right. And the first thing we'll do is to remove any paint that shouldn't be there, just by wetting it and soaking it away. I think we've lost a bit of the hair here, so I'm going to use a little bit of gouache on this painting to get a bit more texturing. Normally I just do a straight watercolour, but I want to do some texturing down lower down, but I also want to do a bit more around these leaves and things as well. So there's two things I'm going to do: put the darks in lower down and just touch up with a bit of white acrylic or gouache some of these lighter areas that have been a little bit lost. So I'm going to come down and cheat a little bit now with a little bit of white. I'm going to come out the side of the hat here, just give him some hair down that edge that we've lost. To say, with a picture like this, it really matters, because it wouldn't if we were just painting a loose watercolour of a basic scene. But with this, as it's actually a portrait of a couple, I've got to be a bit more careful over that. I think I'd like to still be a little bit darker underneath the hat here. So I'm going to take a little burnt sienna again and add to that a tad of the purple, because things do dry lighter in watercolour. We do really sometimes have to come back into that. And while we've got a little bit of white on the brush, let's have a look at the waterfall, because I think we might just touch up a little bit of light at the top edges, which just comes over, cascades over there, just by dragging that brush across. You can get a little bit of white just to catch the highlights here of how it's cascading down. Let's just rub away some of this masking fluid that we put on earlier. White's back again here. Quite a lot of work in something like this. And we'll take the small brush and just tidy it up a bit. A person, little book or whatever it is there. Here this bangle wants just thinning down a bit. Just trying to get this. This only takes the right mark in the right place just to get that smile right. Just trying to get that right yet. I haven't quite got it. I think we've got enough done with them, so now let's look at the details in other places. And on this area here, we've got some quite nice branches that are coming up. So we'll take this rigger and just see if we can put in a few of these coming up, broken branches just coming up through these twigs, coming up, holding together these autumn leaves. Gives us those nice thin branches. Then we can go back up to an ordinary brush just to put in one or two of the slightly thicker ones. Could use the hake broken up, but I'm going to just use this tip of this brush for the moment. Give ourselves a bit more texture. And actually, looking at it, there's a little bit more texture of leaf to the right of the figure, which we've missed out, and I'm going to use a little bit of the white gouache and some lemon yellow, which is opaque, just to put a bit of that back in again. So lemon yellow with a little touch of the white gouache. Lemon yellow, not the aureolin this time, because the lemon yellow is opaque. It will go in there quite nicely, look. Right, so we've virtually finished that area, although I think I might like just a little bit more green back up in here. Right, I want to come down to perhaps a little more detail lower down. Look at the grasses again. How these stones just have a slightly more of an edge perhaps to them. And I want to go quite a bit darker. I'm going to go down to my indigo with a little touch of warm in it, and of course under the leaves and the edges there are going to be some nice darks. So I'll take a little bit now, I think, of the alizarin. Just remember we've got some masking fluid there to get rid of on the shoes. Because this is a white masking fluid, it's easy to forget it's there. Warms in the alizarin. You see how that draws the eye forward, it brings the painting forward towards us because we have our detail in the foreground and our warms in the foreground, and getting cooler as we go back. Talking of which, we now want to start to go back here and just indicate a few of these bits of grasses and so on. So I think we're on our finishing touches now, just to pull these figures together. So there we are, shall we leave it at that? They're leaning together a bit better. I think we're there. So we're to find a signature. There we are.